I knew something was wrong even before I entered the office. I didn't even need to see Scott's face. The look in his assistant's eyes was enough. She avoided eye contact, holding her coffee cup as if it were a hand grenade. No steam, no flavor, dead coffee. I walked past her and knocked, even though I knew I was expected. He came right in. "Come in, Tessa," without the usual "Mrs. Blake." No smile. He didn't even get up. Scott Daniels, new vice president of finance. A year with the company, tops. Face like a guy who just sold his first startup. The suit is more expensive than my monthly bonus. The thought in his eyes is cheap. "I'll be brief," he said. And even then I knew. This was not a conversation. This was a sentence. He opened the folder. Dryly, like an accountant. "Yesterday, a transaction for $2.4 million was approved. You signed it at 6:16 p.m., but this purchase should not have been approved. You violated the procedure, and this, unfortunately, creates grounds for a serious disciplinary step." I didn't say anything, because at such moments, it's not the words that matter. What matters is breathing. "Unfortunately, we have to end our cooperation," he added, looking somewhere above my head. "Today is your last day. You will receive severance pay as per your contract. A letter with an explanation will be in the mail." He looked at me, expecting me to explode. But I just nodded. "Can I ask you one question?" I said calmly. He hesitated. "Yes, of course." "Have you seen this signature yourself?" A short pause. He blinked. "It's been checked. It's in the system. You're authorized." "I understand," I replied, and stood up, without the theater, without a breaking voice. I just stood up, like a person who knows when this game has been decided without her. I left the office holding only my badge, and honestly, there was something strange about how light it was in my palm. It was like a paper ticket for the last flight, from which you will get off in the wrong city anyway. On the way out, I saw Scott's assistant. Her hands were shaking. She wanted to say something, but couldn't. And I understand her. She will be taught that silence is cheaper than explanation. I left the office. In 17 years, I had never been on maternity leave or sick leave. And today, for the first time, I stood outside the building and didn't know if I would return. But there was one but. I knew for sure that this signature was not mine. In the evening of the same day, I put a cup of tea on the table and froze, looking out the window. The look was as if inward. The silence didn't annoy me. On the contrary, it calmed me down. A kind of instruction for the brain. Don't react, analyze. My laptop smelled like overheated plastic. It was from the days when reports were printed in duplicate. It was old, but faithful. I kept it, with all the backups. No, not because I didn't trust the new system, but because I knew all too well how often a new system is just a cover for someone's need to save money. I opened the internal portal. My login was still working. Someone had forgotten to remove me from access, or simply didn't have time. In the approvals section, I saw a document with a signature. The signature is mine, with my name, with the hour, with my IP address. But I remember every single click. At 18:16, I was in the car. I stopped for bread and green tea. I even have a receipt, the same 18:16. I paid by card. Here's the paradox. I was signing $1 million deal, standing in line at the store, without a laptop, without a network. It wasn't me. And then a strange thing happened. I didn't feel anger, not resentment. I felt contempt, not toward Scott, but for the very mechanism of this dismissal. At how easy it is to point at a woman over 50, say, she made a mistake, and then not even check to see if it's true. I went back to the letter that was handed to me in the office, a printed document with a sad phrase, "The responsibility for the decision lies with the signed party." And if the party did not sign? I closed the computer. I pulled on a blanket. But sleep did not come. And it wasn't anxiety. It was attentiveness. I knew myself. If I am silent, it means I am counting. The morning started with coffee and a phone call from a former colleague from another department. She had heard that I had been sent away. She asked if I was okay. I answered sincerely, "I'm just waiting for everything to fall into place." And I said it calmly, without even a shadow of bitterness. But before that, I did one thing. A small thing, but important. I opened my old work flash drive and pulled out something I had been saving for years: signature samples, log files, archived copies of approvals. Not because I suspected anything. It's just, I've always been meticulous. I also knew how often things go wrong in a company not because of anger, but because of haste. This time, I didn't know that it would be the key. But I knew one thing. It was not my signature, and someone did not read what they were signing. Everything was suspiciously clean. No, we're sorry, no paperwork. The severance package was processed in one day, and the box with her belongings was delivered by courier, ironically, from the logistics department. The letter from HR came the next morning, before I even had time to finish my coffee. This does not happen. Not at Delcroft. I have seen so much here. People who were fired for 5 weeks. Departments that were reorganized for months. And then there's the firing squad. Cold, clear, as if by a template. I scrolled through LinkedIn to see if any of my former colleagues had liked Scott's new position. Or maybe they were already rushing to support the new policy. It was empty, as if everyone was frozen in anticipation of who would be next. The phone rang at 9:52. I remember it exactly, because at that moment the water boiled on the stove and the kettle made that squeak that makes you want to chew the cabinet handle off. "Miss Blake, it's Christine Mandel from the corporate legal department. Do you have a minute?" Her voice was clear, cold, and a little cautious, like someone who doesn't want to reveal why they're calling right away. "Yes," I replied, sitting on the edge of my chair. "I'm listening. We're currently conducting an internal audit of a series of transactions, including a purchase made in your name. Do I understand correctly that you personally approved it?" Pause. "And how did you get this information?" I asked, not because I didn't want to answer. I just wanted to know what stage they were at. "We have a digital signature with your credentials. But," and here she changed her tone slightly, "there are questions about the IP address and access time." She stopped as if waiting for me to speak. "Okay, I confess." But I remained silent. Silence is also an answer. "I didn't sign it," I said calmly. "And I have documentation of where I was at the time. A receipt from the store, geolocation, phone history, video from cameras. I saved everything." Silence on the other end. "Okay," she said after a few seconds. "Can we arrange a quick meeting online? Just off the record, just to clarify some details." I agreed. And here's the thing. This conversation proved nothing. It didn't guarantee anything. But I knew that the chain had already moved. There was a crack in the system, and someone, not me yet, started looking into it. I turned off the phone and for the first time in 2 days, smiled. Not broadly. Just a little bit in the corner of my lips, like a person who finally heard a crack in the perfect silence. Ironic. I was fired for a signature I didn't sign, and the next question will be, whose signature was it then, and who benefited from it? When Christine shared her logged-in information in the online meeting, I was not relieved. No, it was something else, something closer to aha. You know that moment when you're assembling an IKEA cabinet and you finally find the screw that was holding everything together? This is it. The IP from which the login occurred is an internal address. "The computer is in office B4, she said. "Your office?" "It is," I confirmed. But on March 13th at 5:18 p.m., when the login was made, I was physically downstairs. We were doing a supervisory inspection of the warehouse. I left my tablet on my desk, as usual. She nodded. It didn't seem to surprise her anymore. Who else had access to the device? I held my breath. Who else? Scott's assistant, Joanna. She often came in to take documents, take tea, fill out a spreadsheet. Everything looked familiar. So familiar that even I didn't notice anything alarming. After all, I never closed my tablet when I left for 10 minutes. Why? We're a team. "Wait," I said. "Do you have a record of who made the confirmation?" She didn't answer right away. She seemed to be weighing whether or not to say anything. "Yes, I do." There was indeed a note on the confirmation. Verification was carried out on an internal order, a personalized order, from Joanna Clyde. And then I got a chill, because I knew Joanna did nothing on her own. She did what she was told. And if she had fulfilled an assignment, from whom? Are you sure this isn't hacking? I asked again, even though I knew the answer. This is not hacking. This is an internal redistribution of power. And if the order was unofficial, then this is a violation of the access policy. She stopped and added quietly, almost in a whisper, "This will be serious, very serious, but I didn't want it to be serious. I wanted it to be fair." I thanked her and turned off the phone. I sat down on the floor. I leaned my back against the wardrobe. I stared at one point for a long time. Scott knew. At least he could have known, because such an operation could not have gone through without his approval. Either he let Joanna sign it with my name, or he asked her to. And then I remembered, one conversation, 2 days before everything. "Tess, if you're not there, it's okay. Joanna will handle it, she's in the know," he said. At that moment, I smiled, because I thought it was support, that he trusted me, and now it sounded like, "Turn off your head. We've already decided for you." And do you know what's most ironic? I wouldn't have noticed anything if it weren't for his haste. If it wasn't for the abruptness with which I was snatched out of my 17-year-old life. If he hadn't tried to remove me too quickly, I might still believe in the system. But now I don't. When I walked into the office on Friday at 8:46, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the usual office morning silence, but the silence that carries with it stares. Instead of "Tessa, you're back," I saw Amanda, the office manager, rushing to the coffee machine with the haste of unwanted guests at a family wedding. I wasn't interested in coffee. I was holding a folder. It was gray, plain, without logos. It contained a mandate from Delcroft Holdings corporate audit to perform an independent review of the documentary support of transactions in the period from March 10th to 16. Access to data, but no direct intervention. Deadline, 14 days. So I didn't go back. I went in through another door. I did not go into my office, because it was no longer my office. I went on to the meeting room. It was already open. There was a laptop on the table, a corporate badge of a temporary consultant. No photo. Just T. Blake vertical bar internal audit vertical bar level C. That was enough for me. 15 minutes later, I had a meeting with Martin Holdwell, the board's general counsel. He didn't shake hands, but he said, "You know the system from the inside, and it seems better than many of those who still work in it. We are not asking you to come back, but we need your help, ideally, quietly." "That's perfect," I replied. "Quiet is my superpower. I didn't tell anyone, not even Rebecca in HR, who always knew all the scandals before they happened. I didn't come to take revenge. I didn't even ask for an apology. I was just taking notes." On Monday, I saw Joanna in the hallway. She was holding 3 cups of coffee. One had the Starbucks logo on it. The other 2 were corporate, white, boring. She saw me and froze. She looked confused, and I realized she doesn't know how far I've come yet. She didn't know that she had been asked to explain in writing to the legal department. She didn't know that her letter was already marked, provided voluntarily. I walked past, without stopping, but I did. Instead of 3, it will be 2. She did not answer, but I saw her put 1 cup on the windowsill, and she returned to the office with only 2. On Tuesday, I was reviewing the reports for that day, March 13th. All transactions were made through one account, an account that only I had access to. But I was downstairs, with the team. The cameras confirm this, and the system notes that I logged in from my office, not from the tablet. And what happened after you entered? The check passed. The order was completed, Joanna wrote in the internal chat. And to whom? To Scott. Not to me. Not to the system. To him personally, which means either he approved it, or he ignored it. And in both cases, he lied when he said, "This decision is solely Miss Blake's." It was no longer a question of whether I was guilty or not. The question was, why was he in such a hurry? And most importantly, who else had he taken out of the game like that? On Tuesday, at 10:02 a.m., I walked into the Seattle conference room. It used to be a place for planning new initiatives, followed by a loyalty check meeting. Now it was a cross between an operational briefing and a school PTA meeting. I sat down last, not because I was late, but because I wanted to enter when everyone else was already seated. The room was silent. Even Kyle, who always sips his kefir on the go, stopped chewing. My internal audit badge barely shone, but something else was shining, my silence. "Let's get started," someone said, and I didn't even recognize Scott's voice right away. It was dry, hard, but surprisingly, non-commanding, like a guest who was asked to speak, not a leader who sets the agenda. "Thank you all for gathering." He didn't look in my direction, although he could see that I was there. "We're going to talk about 3 things today: the end of the quarter, customer feedback, and the situation around the March 13th transaction." He paused. He swallowed his saliva. "We're grateful to..." He finally looked in my direction. "Tessa Blake for agreeing to help with the internal audit. It's important for transparency, for trust." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just sat there, like a marker, like a candle in a dark temple that suddenly became bright. "Now, to business," he said, faster than necessary. "So, the operation was unconventional, but according to our latest reviews..." He trailed off. He looked at his tablet, and I could see his fingers trembling. Just a little bit. But they were shaking. No one said anything. I sat and listened to others speak for him, how the commercial director mentioned the controversial practices of recent weeks, how HR subtly hinted at troubling team dynamics. And Scott was silent. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make jokes, and he didn't command. I didn't say a word. I just wrote it down. Slowly, highlighting only one sentence. All actions were coordinated personally. Only not with me. After the meeting, I didn't leave immediately. I waited for everyone to leave, and only then did I leave alone. The corridor was quiet, like after a thunderstorm, and I heard footsteps. "Tessa, can I talk to you for a minute?" Scott. I turned around. It's good to have you back. Even temporarily. I really..." "Don't." I interrupted him calmly. "I'm just listening." "Yes, but..." He took a gulp of air. "If there's anything I could clarify..." I looked at him steadily. "We'll have a formal meeting. We'll talk there." And she walked away. Slowly. Without anger. Without drama. Like someone who no longer has to prove anything. She just knows. "So, Miss Blake, are you ready?" I wasn't asked to give my permission. They were asking me for the facts. I opened the file. It's a paper folder. No slides. No, let's move on to the next point. Just document after document. March 13th, 4:41 p.m. Logging into my account from my office tablet. I was in the trading floor. This is confirmed by the video from the cameras. I have posted a screenshot. 1642. Payment approval. The IP address is the tablet. Authorization. My login. But since I was not physically near the device, access was granted without my knowledge. Another sheet of paper. 1643. A message on the company chat from Joanna Reed. Confirmation is in. It's done as you said. The addressee is SD. I looked at Scott. He wasn't moving, but his jaw was tense. "So," I said evenly, "Miss Reed followed the instructions she said she received verbally. From you." He began. "That's not entirely true." She confirmed it in an internal interrogation, in the presence of HR. The protocol is attached. Another sheet. In addition, I pulled out the last paragraph, the conclusion of the legal department. The procedure was violated. The signature is illegitimate. The decision is legally null and void. A pause. Silence. The air in the room has changed temperature. "You deliberately concealed this fact and fired me." I kept my voice low, without asking, without the right to answer, to avoid scrutiny, and to shift the responsibility. Scott tried to say something. "I suggest not commenting until the investigation is complete." One of the directors cut him off. "Miss Blake, do you have anything else?" "Yes, I do." I put down the last sheet of paper. It had a timeline on it, minute by minute, and one more sentence. It's in yellow. She did not sign, but her account was used. I gathered the documents in a calm pile. That was all. No one applauded, but no one doubted me. When I left, all I heard was, How did he let this happen? This is a serious violation. And he didn't even recognize it. I walked past the office, and I saw Joanna sitting there with empty eyes, silently clutching a plastic water bottle. Scott was standing by the window. For the first time, not as a leader, but as a man who had just been caught red-handed, and they wouldn't let go. "We appreciate your cooperation, Miss Blake." The chairman's voice was calm, but it had a different register, the one you can't mistake for respect. "We have heard all the materials, including the audit report, Joanna Reed's statements, and the company chats, and we consider it necessary." I wasn't breathing. "To suspend Vice President Scott Daniels pending a disciplinary investigation." The room fell silent, but it wasn't the same as before. Not a sticky one, but liberating. "And you," he looked at me, "we offer you to head the operational department for the period of recovery. We understand that this is unplanned, but now we need more than just a specialist. We need a person who is trusted." I paused. A long one, intentional. "I agreed. But with two conditions," I said. The director raised his eyebrows. "We're listening. First, I need a separate analyst with the authority to check all past internal orders without a formal signature. It's a deal. Second, I'm not returning under the wing of the old team. I am forming a new one." This is absolutely logical. I was not accompanied to the office with a standing ovation. They just opened the door, and they parted in silence. I went into the office that I had passed by 2 weeks ago without stopping. There was a sign with my name on it, my new position. I did not smile. I didn't cry. I just sat down, took a breath, and opened my laptop. "Connect Grace to HR, and ask for a list of all previous dismissals due to violation of procedures. I want to see them personally." "Just a minute," the assistant said. Her voice was trembling, and for the first time, I allowed myself a soft smile. "Don't worry. They don't punish questions here anymore." 40 minutes after the appointment, Christine came to see me. "We're opening a separate case for Joanna," she said. "She says Scott often asked her to settle the signing because Tessa will approve it later anyway, but she can't provide written confirmation." "Of course," I nodded. "Verbal orders are the currency of cowards." Christine couldn't help but smile. "How are you feeling?" I looked out the window. People below were rushing to meetings. Life was going on as usual, but for me, it was just beginning. Calmly and confidently, and this time, not out of caution, but out of conviction. The first day is like the first return after a storm. The walls are the same. The carpet is the same. But the looks? They are not the same. I walked down the corridor, feeling as if there was a spotlight behind me. Every step was heard. Every sound of heels echoed like a hammer in a courtroom. "Good morning." I nodded to the receptionist, who couldn't look me in the eye a month ago. She smiled, sincerely. This was new. There was a scheduled meeting at 9 o'clock, but I knew they weren't waiting for a review of the numbers. They were waiting for a signal. "Colleagues, for 3 days I studied the cases of employees who had been fired for procedural violations. In all cases, Scott Daniels signed off. In all cases, without external review. And in all of them, the explanations were surprisingly similar. I didn't raise my voice. I just stated it. That's why from now on, we are introducing the following. Every dismissal is to be made only after a double check, and every internal instruction must be in writing." Silence. Then, a nervous clearing of the throat by HR, and then the phrase I was waiting for. "Are these new rules?" "No," I answered. "This should have been the norm a long time ago, but we all ignored it." In the evening, fatigue hit my body like cold water. I was sitting in my new office, in a place that seemed unattainable a month ago. Scott used to sit here. Now it was me. And that's when there was a knock on the door. "Miss Blake? I'm Kevin, the logistics guy from the night team. Can I see you for a minute?" "Sure." He pulled out a stack of documents and correspondence from the internal chat. "I worked under Scott. He never wrote anything official, but he always said, 'Do as you're told, and I'll confirm if there's anything wrong.'" "Did you keep the correspondence?" He nodded, and that's when I realized that we had started a chain reaction. "Why didn't you speak up earlier?" "Because I was afraid. and now I see that someone is finally not afraid, and I want to be a part of it. I kept the documents, I thanked them, and asked not to tell anyone about it until the audit was completed. The next day, a letter. From Joanna Reed, subject. If possible, I would like to explain. Off the record, just between us. No, it's not between us anymore. It's between her and corporate ethics. Between her and the truth. I forwarded her letter to my lawyer Christine with a brief comment. There will be no more informal explanations. If there is something to say, there is a protocol. On Wednesday, I met Lisa. She was a former coordinator in the supply department who had also been fired due to violations of logistics procedures. I saw the news, she said, holding a coffee from a gas station. Are you really back? No. I re-recorded the scene. She laughs, and then adds quietly, if you need someone who knows how things really work at the bottom, I'm available. Okay, come back on Monday, but not as someone from the past, but as part of the new. In the evening, when everyone had already left, I stayed in the empty office. The light went out in the open part of the space. Only my office was still on. I went to the window. There was a parking lot below, where I used to stand with a box of things, where I couldn't even say goodbye. And today I wasn't holding a box. I was holding the rules of the game. The clock reads 9:57. There are 11 people in the boardroom, and there is silence. I have 48 pages in front of me, a summary of the month, audit, interviews, archival records, memos. I was not preparing to speak. I was preparing to finish. Clearly, emotionlessly, but finally. Miss Blake, the chairman of the board said, are you ready to present your final findings? I nodded, not for effect, for focus. Over the past 5 years, the company has recorded 14 dismissals, formally cited as procedural violations. None of them had an external review. In 9 cases, the signatures did not match the employees' statements. In 7 cases, verbal instructions from the Vice President of Operations were recorded. No confirmation, no protocols. I opened the page with the evidence. Chats, screenshots, testimony. This is not just an abuse of power. This is a systemic model of avoiding responsibility. One of the members of the council, the same one who didn't even look me in the eye a few weeks ago, asked, do you think it was intentional? I didn't say yes. I just opened the letter from Joanna. I knew it was a violation, but he said, if anything, I'll say it was your decision, and no one will take your side. A second of silence, then another one, and then the decision. Due to the confirmed facts, the board makes a decision. Scott Daniels is dismissed from the company with the formal opening of a disciplinary file. It was not loud, but it was deafening, like a blow to the old foundation. After the meeting, I had a conversation with Christine. She looked at me as if I had just won something more than a position. Tessa, do you realize you can stay? As COO, full-time. I didn't say anything, not because I didn't know what I wanted, but because for the first time, the answer wasn't supposed to be instant. I will stay, but not for the office, but for the structure. She nodded, and I realized I was heard. A week later, I initiated the launch of a new internal platform. Signal is an anonymous channel for complaints and messages that had not been passed before. I brought Lisa back, now as an internal ethics coordinator, Kevin as an access and risk analyst, and even Arthur, an accountant who used to be afraid to speak up in front of Scott. Now he was leading training on financial transparency. It was not revenge. It was a restoration of trust. And Scott? He filed an appeal. He lost, and disappeared from the radar. His name was no longer mentioned, not because they were afraid, but because it no longer carried weight. And Joanna? She was transferred to another office, without the ability to influence the documents. I didn't comment on it, because there was no need to, because words now matter less than actions. On the last day of the quarter, we gathered the team. Without pathos, no champagne. I stood in front of people who were afraid to even look up a month ago, and now they were standing next to me. In this company, I said, there will be no more yours and theirs. There will be no who is closer to the management. There will only be who does the right thing. I did not expect applause, but what I got was complete silence. And then, The first step. And then the second. People came up to me. They thanked me. Someone just said, "Finally." That evening, I was alone in the office again. I opened the same folder on my laptop that started it all. Dismissal_TB. The file that was a pass to defeat. It was the entry point to the restart. I pressed delete. Because some things are not worth keeping as trophies. They are just a reminder that even if you've been removed, you can come back. But not to the same place, but to a higher place.